Before we get started, this project was supported by this grant award number shown here, awarded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, Office of Justice Programs, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this publication or online learning event are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. We are the Tribal Youth Resource Center. We envision a future where Indigenous youth thrive through traditional life ways, enhancing the opportunities for Indigenous communities to expand their potential in protecting and nurturing their most sacred asset, the youth. We are part of Tribal Law and Policy Institute. We are dedicated to providing free publication resources, comprehensive training, and technical assistance for Native nations and tribal justice systems in pursuit of our vision to empower Native communities to create and control their own institutions for the benefit of all community members now and for future generations. You could learn more about these programs shown on your screen and more about TYRC by visiting home.tlpi.org. Now, with great honor, I get to present to you our presenters, Ms. Chris Pacheco and Judge Pat Sekaquaptewa. Go ahead, Chris.
Oatsiopa. Hinyame Chris Pacheco. Zinahanu Shashko Ashti. Goikama. Biju for my Anishinaabe family and Makwad Hindo Diem. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Pacheco. I am a Tribal Healing to Wellness Court Specialist with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. By training, I'm a licensed drug and alcohol abuse counselor here in the state of New Mexico, where I'm coming to you from my home in the Pueblo of Laguna. I have had, over 25 years in the field of drug and alcohol abuse counseling. Prior to working for TLPI, I worked for my tribe for 14 years. And thank you for joining us today for this really popular topic. Judge?
Thank you, Chris. My name is Pat Sekaquaptewa, and I come from the village of Kekotsmovi and also Hotvilla on the Hopi Reservation in Arizona. My background is in law. I'm a tribal judge at Hopi, and my full-time job is working with TLPI and TYRC as the TTA manager for the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Courts. And I've been working with the wellness courts since they started in the late 90s and watched them really change over the years and expand and innovate. And I'm looking forward to see what we learned today about incentives and other approaches to working with youth in our Tribal Healing to Wellness courts.
Here are some learning objectives for today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the adolescent brain and understanding that it's still developing and its effects on youth in decision making. And this is really important, especially when we're working with our youth and we're responding to their behavior in a juvenile healing to wellness court situation. Number two, also that drug and alcohol use at this stage disrupts brain functions and development. And how is it that we need to pay attention to that? But then also, what are some other healthy ways that we can work with our youth? Also, building recovery, about recovery and barriers. Because at this age, oftentimes long-term recovery or long-term abstinence may not always be the goal for our adolescents. Also, how is it that we can help our youth build a healthy brain and healthy connections, not only just to our communities, but to our culture? Also, how is it that we respond to the youth behavior with incentives, accountability to goals, and sanctions? Also, what are the best practices that are out there? I usually do a lot of work with adult healing to wellness courts. And when I do work with them, one of the questions I often get is there a list? Is there a list of incentives and sanctions that you can share with us? If I ever find that list, I'm going to sell it and probably retire. but really this will help you take a look at what are those best practices out there that can help individualize responses to and motivate behavior in a juvenile healing to wellness court situation. Also, we want to make sure that we are providing you information on a trauma-informed process. Next slide. So let's get started with the adolescent brain. Next slide. So I will let you know I am a survivor of my child's adolescence. My child is so fortunate to be 35 years old. And I say that because probably around the age of 15, 16, I had the desire to drop them off in a remote location. Of course, I did not. They are a healthy adult right now, 35 years old, working at a local community college here in New Mexico. But there were days. And if we take a look at the anatomy of teenagers' brains, this is just a caricature and kind of a nice light way to look at it. Their brains are so filled with so many things. I kind of like this. I like this little version because the part that my child often represented during this time was embarrassed by parents section. You know, there was a period of time when my child really did not acknowledge his father and I as parents. He just appeared out of, you know, a puff of smoke and did not have parents. The only time that he had parents was when he needed something like the car or some cash. So this is just kind of a silly way of looking at the anatomy of our teenagers' brains. Next slide. But in reality, they have several parts of things going on in their developing brain. And I say developing, yes. And we do have some research that tells us that adolescents or our brains do not fully develop until the age of 25. And this is why it's so really important for us to pay attention to things such as early adolescent alcohol and drug use, also their involvement in the juvenile justice system. So a lot of times our adolescents are really focusing and, you know, working with that frontal part of the brain where there's a lot of, you know, emotion going on. You know, a lot of the latter part of the brains have not fully developed. And so a lot of they're very emotional, they're very risk-taking, they're very spontaneous, you know, let's go do this. And I was joking and teasing with Ashley and Judge Pat as we were putting this presentation together. I grew up on my tribal lands. I grew up on the reservation. I'm a res girl. And it is amazing that I am the age that I am because several times during my adolescence, I put myself in situations that I probably should not and could not have been here. Jumping over large hills in cars with my friends, going places that I probably shouldn't have gone, you know. So there's a lot of risk taking during this time. But how is it when we're looking at that risk taking, whether or not it's this kind of healthy risk taking versus, you know, we need to be really concerned. So next slide. So when we're also looking at them, because the prefrontal cortex is still developing, you know, the teenagers, they rely a lot on this extended amygdala to make decisions. And that part of the brain is associated with emotions, impulses, aggression, instinctive behavior. And remember, brain's not developed fully until 25. So as I was telling you previously, you know, they can express more and stronger emotions. I remember my child, if I just looked at them a certain way, you know, there was this intense reaction as they were an adolescent. Also, this impulsive decision making also happens during this time. So next slide. And because we know that the brain is still developing for our adolescents, and that there is a fair amount of risk-taking behavior going on, one of the things that is that risk-taking behavior that our adolescents often engage in is experimenting or engagement in drugs and or alcohol use. And we do have some concerns because early use can lead to addiction and other serious illnesses. I started my career at a school-based teen health center. And when I was working with the adolescents I was working with, of course, sometimes I would do intakes, and I would sit and do assessments with the students I was working with. And one of the questions that I would always ask is, at what age did you start using drugs or alcohol? And I think some of the most common responses I got was like 6. And I would kind of find that interesting and say, why 6? And so they would often describe situations where there would be parties in the homes that they lived in. And as people were passed out, they would be up the next morning and they would go around drinking or looking for empties, or drinking what was left over on the table. So their exposure was very early. And as I was looking at them and working with them at age 15, they were looking at some pretty serious involvement in drugs or alcohol use. Oftentimes, their use happens in times of transitions, possibly in transitioning from maybe middle school into high school, or as they're getting older, maybe as they're transitioning out of maybe into young adulthood. They could just be experimenting or engaging during this time. Also, because the brain is still developing, use of drugs at this age has more potential to disrupt that brain function. Remember, like I said, it's still developing in those areas that are critical to motivation, memory, learning, judgment, and behavioral control. Those are some areas that are really kind of a concern. Also, just to bring to your attention, going back to often times of transition, it can also happen when, and I'm just saying this as a possibility, and part of this comes from my own experience. As a child or as a young person may be starting to realize their sexual identity or orientation. My child came out at the age of 15. And some of these changes also kind of, came about during that time. So when there's transition, or when they're, maybe coming to some certain decisions in their life, in the way that they view things and the way that they are feeling about things, oftentimes we may see these. It's not the same for everybody, but it could possibly be during a time of transition. Next slide. So why do adolescents use? First one is to fit in with family, friends, community, their group that they are hanging out with, their whatever they are seeing, to fit in. During this time, remember, we all just kind of want to fit in. We want to wear the same kind of things. We want to watch the same kind of things, listen to the same kind of music as our peer group, or as individuals who are close to us. Also to feel good. Like we have mentioned, adolescence is kind of full of some turmoil. There's a lot of intense emotions going on. Breaking up, and if they're in relationships, breaking up, or all of these things, and oftentimes they might not always feel good, so they may turn to drug or alcohol use. Also to feel better. During adolescence, we may see the onset of mental health issues starting to surface. We could see some possible depression. Also, unfortunately, within some of our tribal communities and among some of our tribal youth, they may have experienced some trauma earlier as young children that is now starting to really take a heavy toll on them as adolescents. So the kind of that need or that want to just feel better and turn to drugs or alcohol, maybe to do that. Also to do better, oftentimes we see adolescents who are utilizing those drugs to maybe enhance performance in athletics or, or academics. So, and then also just to experiment. What does this do to you? If I drink this, what does this taste like? Or, if I drink this amount, what's going to happen to me? It's that risk taking and experimentation type kind of behavior that just comes with adolescence. Next slide. So you may be wondering why we're talking about this in this section of incentives and sanctions, especially because we're talking about responding to behavior. And when we're responding to participant behavior, this is part of their behavior. And this is part of the behavior that we are going to see when we have our juveniles in our healing to wellness courts. So we may always wonder, why are they not happy to be in this program? Why are they not ecstatic to checking with either a JPO or a juvenile healing to wellness coordinator? Or why are they just not knocking down the door to come and check in with the judge? Part of it is because of their stage of life, because of their adolescence. But also, in this next session, we just kind of want to also talk a little bit about recovery. What does recovery look like for our adolescents? Next slide. So we have a polling question. Ashley, take us away.
Yes, thank you. So polling tells us what you know. It's anonymous and it helps guide the next set of conversations and the next slides. So I'm going to launch poll. Just tell us what you know. This one just has one question, but I will also read it. And so bear with me here as I launch. Which of these are barriers to an adolescent engaging in a recovery process? Denial, peer influence, having a hard time accepting the label or addiction of alcohol, identity, age, or all of the above. It's multiple choice. Just tell us what you know. So which of these are barriers to an adolescent engaging in a recovery process? Denial, peer influence, having a hard time accepting the label of addict or alcoholic, identity, age, or all of the above. It's multiple choice. You could choose as many or as little as you'd like, or all of the above. We have about 30 seconds left. So which of these are barriers to an adolescent engaging in a recovery process? Multiple choice. And we're close to being done, 10 more seconds. Some of you said denial. Some of you said peer influence. Some said having a hard time accepting the label of addict or alcoholic. Identity, again, some of you said age or all of the above. So I'm interested to find out the answer. And 80% of you said all of the above. I'm gonna go ahead and poll, and Miss Chris, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Next slide. So when we talk about recovery, we talk about four components or four areas that we're looking at recovery. We're looking at health, overcoming or managing one's health, disease, or symptoms, maybe being able to make informed health choices to support physical and emotional well-being, having a stable home and a safe place to live, also purpose, conducting meaningful activities and having the independence, and checking, and income and resources, and resources to participate in society. And then also community, having relationships and social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. Now, my question to you all, and because these are SAMHSA's areas of recovery, and SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, but do these apply to our juveniles? And you can throw something in the chat. Anything. If you think that these apply to juveniles as we're working with them. Next slide, Ashley. And so going back to our polling question. So these are some of the barriers to youth recovery process. And if you look at it, it's all of them. Part of that is that denial. A lot of times that our adolescents are like, no, it's never going to happen to me. I can't, I'm just having a good time. I'm just trying things out. I can stop whenever I want. Okay. So oftentimes it's a denial that there is a problem or that they can eventually lead to an addiction. Also, their identity is often part of this. That, oh, I'm young, I'm indestructible. I can handle it. Part of who they are as adolescents. Also, accepting that label of an addict or an alcoholic is not always one of those things that our adolescents often think about. To them, addicts and alcoholics are old. They're older people. They're maybe people who are homeless, and maybe they see them on the streets, or they see them in their tribal communities walking in between the store and other communities, or they may be people in their own family. They just don't accept or think of themselves in those labels. Also, peer influence is often one of the barriers of recovery within adolescents. As I told you before, I worked at an adolescent school-based teen health center. And there were times when I would have to send adolescents to our local adolescent treatment facility. And of course, their peers are going to come and they're going to ask me, when does so-and-so get out? When did they get out? And of course I could not tell them any of that information. And I would just kind of ask them, why do you want to know? And 9 times out of 10, I would get the response of, because I want to be that first person who gets them drunk or high when they get back from treatment. And it would always break my heart, because we had just sent this student, this juvenile, this young person to a treatment facility for, I think back during that time, anywhere from 35 to 45 days. And they done some good work, because I was going to the facility and seeing how much progress they were making. We were making gains. And then to hear their peers say that when they come back, that they wanted to be the first one to get them back into the drug or alcohol use behavior. That always broke my heart. And part of it was because that's how, their peers were thinking at that time of, I just, I don't want them to change, or, that I want them to be like me, or, I want them to be part of my peer group all over again. They weren't exactly using those words, but those were some of the thoughts. So peer influence can also be a barrier to a youth recovery process. Age, I just presented some information on brain development and their stages of life. So age can also be a barrier. At this age, they think they're indestructible. They think they can handle everything and anything. So oftentimes we find out that it is a combination of all of these things that can be barriers to youth wanting to get into a recovery process. Next slide. Here's ways. How is it that we can help youth build a healthy adolescent brain? 1, encourage positive behavior. Catch them being good. I know there are so many times as adolescents that they're maybe not doing things the way we kind of want them to do. They're maybe sleeping late, or they're forgetting to take out the trash, or they're forgetting to feed the dog or the cats or the animals or whatever, but we really want to catch them being good. Emphasize any positive behavior that you see doing. And this is one of those things that can transfer into a juvenile healing to wellness court situation. Just encouraging that positive behavior, catch them being good. Also promoting those good thinking skills. I know I mentioned earlier that a lot of the decision-making skills are not always well developed in an adolescent brain, but being able to give them this opportunity to make those decisions for themselves, decisions on maybe how they interact with the family. So promoting those good thinking skills, getting enough sleep. I think I might be in my second adolescence because I enjoy sleeping. I would rather sleep late. Also staying connected and setting boundaries are also really good. I can tell you several boundaries that I had to set as a parent for my child as an adolescent, that today, now that they are 35, they kind of look back on and they kind of laugh. But also investing in each adolescent individually. And again, this is one of those things that can transfer into a healing to wellness court, a juvenile healing to wellness court situation. And we're looking at judicial interaction. The judge is very key at spending time with that adolescent. Juvenile probation officers and case managers are key in spending time with the adolescents and individual, getting to know them. What are their likes? What are their dislikes? So investing in them individually. Also understanding how adolescents spend their time. It's important. I know during my time as an adolescent, sports was a big thing, school was a big thing. But also you may have adolescents that are involved in their culture and their cultural traditions. And this is a great thing, because maybe oftentimes you can help them be peer mentors for those younger people who are just wanting to learn. One of the things that I always find really fascinating, and it lifts me up about adolescents, is they like to teach. They really, and given the opportunity, they like to teach others, maybe something that they know, or, something that they're just learning. So giving them that opportunity to do those things. Next slide. And I believe Judge Pat is going to take us through the Juvenile Drug Treatment Court guidelines and the tribal key components.
Thank you so much, Chris. So we're going to hit the technical part of our presentation here and start with some of the standards. I believe we have a poll. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, we're going to do a set of 3 polling questions. Ashley, can you show us the first poll?
All right, I'm going to launch this one, and here we go. So here's the first one, and let's see here. Bear with me as perfect. All right, so unfortunately, Pat, it's showing all 3, but the first one was another name for sanctions and incentives: progressive rewards and consequences, contingency management, incentives and sanctions, or all of the above. So that's the first question. So the first question, another name for sanctions and incentives, progressive rewards and consequences, contingency management, incentives and sanctions, or all of the above. The first question is multiple choice. Tell us what you know. And if Judge Pat, if you wanted to talk on the first one, and then we could go to the next one and digest that one and then go to the third, I'm happy to do that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And then just for folks who are, if it's kind of collapsed on your screen, you can drag it wider with your mouse. I know it is on mine. And then you can see all 3 questions. So the first question, I guess maybe is a little bit of a trick question. So the answer is all of the above. Because we know that the key components talks about the tribal key components talk about progressive rewards and sanctions. The Juvenile Drug Treatment Court guidelines talk about incentives and sanctions. And we're going to teach you about a new best practice approach called the 4-pronged approach, and they talk about contingency management. All of these are talking about incentives and sanctions. So the right answer is the last one.
Good to know. All right, let's go to the second one. It is a best practice for a juvenile healing and wellness court to use incentives and sanctions to do what? Encourage participant compliance with the juvenile healing and wellness court requirements, to detect participant violation of requirements, to promote participant ability to take responsibility and to be accountable for their actions, while allowing for, oh, and it's cut off a little bit. Let me hover over. While allowing for them to complete the juvenile healing and wellness court. And then the fourth part of that is to help participants develop skills to reduce substance use and increase their ability to make healthy choices, using tangible practices like rewards, behavior contracts, and substance use monitoring, and to support desired behavior change. So we'll give it about a minute to answer number 2. It is a best practice for a juvenile healing and wellness court to use incentives and sanctions to do what? Take about a minute to answer, and we'll see how I see all of your answers. This is really great to see what you know. Encourage participant compliance with the Juvenile Healing and Wellness Court requirements, to detect participant violation of requirements, to promote participant ability to take responsibility and to be accountable for their actions, to help participants develop skills to reduce substance use and increase their ability to make healthy choices. So which of those do you think is a best practice for a juvenile healing and wellness court? And about 30 more seconds for question number 2, and then Judge Pat will explain more. All right, Judge Pat, go ahead and take it away for number 2.
Can you tell which one got the most answers?
Yes, the last one, to help participants develop skills to reduce substance use and increase their ability to make healthy choices. And that one had 69% answered, although there was actually almost equal in the other ones.
Okay, well, maybe you all don't need this webinar because the right answer is number 4. Number 4 goes with the 4-pronged approach. There's a subtle change in the approaches of drug courts over the years. They used to be very almost like probation compliance oriented. And so at the beginning of the movement, the top 2, detecting violations, would have been the right answers. But over the years, we've learned from our clinicians and other folks who work with youth that we're really helping them develop skills, and we're helping them to achieve their desired behavior changes with sanctions and incentives. And indeed, we've flipped the language now so that it's incentives first instead of sanctions first. So the right answer to number 2 is the last one.
I learn something new every day. All right, let's go to number 3 question. A juvenile healing and wellness court should respond to a participant's return to substance use by doing what? Giving them another chance, sanctioning them with the highest level of sanction, a weekend in detention. Third, it depends. A tolerance for return to use is determined on an individual basis, and responses should be based on what is known about each youth's goals and progress. And fourth, send them to residential treatment. So which of these do you think, and this is single choice, a juvenile healing and wellness court should respond to a participant's return to substance use by doing what? And you only get one answer in this one. Don't worry, we're not grading you. So which do you think it is? I see a few more people just answering this one, so we'll give it 30 seconds more. All right, it looks like polling has stopped. So a juvenile healing and wellness court should respond to a participant's return to substance use by doing what? Majority of you, 88% of you said the third one. It depends. And it depends on a tolerance for return to use is determined on individual basis. So Judge Pat, which is correct? There's this second highest polling was giving them a second chance. So what was it?
That is awesome. The right answer was number 3. We've got a lot of people who are high achievers in this group. The 4-pronged approach says there's a tolerance for return to use because what we know from our drug court counterparts and the research is that people will relapse. So it's an important to recognize that and individualize the responses to people who do relapse. There was one other option in there that I'd like to talk about. It was number 4, send them to residential treatment. We know now that there's often a confusion with sanctions and incentives and treatment responses. And sometimes our court side of the team will want to send someone to residential treatment because they're not complying in some ways with the requirements of the juvenile healing to wellness court. But really, we need to leave that up to the treatment providers because they're the ones who know what the treatment plan is, and they work with them individually, and we should listen to them on our team. So that was a wrong answer, number 4. Okay, thank you so much, Ashley. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so the 2 governing standards that we look to in juvenile healing to wellness courts today are the tribal key components and the juvenile drug treatment court guidelines. And let me just say something about the tribal key components. They were based on originally the adult tribal key components, and they have not been revised yet for youth. They're also a little older. The last iteration was pre-COVID in 2014. So while we look to the key components, they're a little bit outdated, and you can see that in the language on the right-hand side here. They use the terms progressive rewards and consequences, and that they're used to encourage compliance. And the juvenile drug court treatment guidelines now direct us away from that compliance primary approach. And they ask us to look more individually at youth. So I rely for guidance now, because it's later in time and better in research, on the Juvenile Drug Treatment Court guidelines. And specifically, you want to look at guidelines 5.1, 5.2, and 5.6. Under 5.1, they recommend that the application of incentives should equal or exceed sanctions. Incentives should be favored with adolescents over sanctions because they work to help change their behavior in healthier ways. The second set of guidelines is 5.2, and it's important that participants feel that incentives and sanctions are fair, and that has a lot to do with how you talk to them and manage their expectations and individualize their incentives and sanctions. And then guideline 5.6, the team should be prepared to respond to any return to substance use in ways that consider the youth's risks, needs, and responsivity. That's another way to say you should really be individualizing how you're responding to that particular youth instead of having a canned response. So for example, remember Chris Pacheco was telling us, hey, there really isn't a magic list of sanctions and incentives like the set of lists that everybody uses, because the list of incentives and sanctions should be individualized to that particular young person and what they care about and what they're interested in and the things that would incentivize them. Okay, so I recommend to everybody that you take a look at the Juvenile Drug Treatment Court guidelines of 2016. They are research-based, and it's the best we know as of now. And because we don't have a lot of good research on tribal, native community approaches specifically, we default to the guidelines until we know more. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so Chris advises us to respond to participant behavior from day one. What does that mean to me as a judge, for example? Well, I may not have realized this before I started working with drug courts and juvenile healing to wellness courts, but case managers are really important to make this whole thing work. And they need to build a relationship with that young person and their people, whoever they choose to be their people. And that relationship involves understanding what their goals are for themselves, what their interests are, what their hopes are. And this we call gathering information. And we call this intake and assessment. And it sounds really dry, but it's actually something really important. It's a relationship with that young person. And usually it comes through the case manager to the team. How do we use that information? Well, some tribes definitely learning about their goals helps us talk to them about how their conduct is furthering or not furthering their goals as they move through our juvenile healing to wellness court phases. Also, it informs our incentives and sanctions. So, for example, some tribal healing to wellness courts, juvenile healing to wellness courts, are having them fill out a form where they tell us their favorite things very early on in gathering information from them. So that tells us, oh, maybe they're budding artists and they really value paint and canvases or sketching items. That tells us what kinds of incentives we may want to invest in and use particularly with that young person. So you can see how that magic list of incentives starts to evaporate. We also want to learn more about them from them and their family. And other people, maybe it's not their family who are important to them. Maybe they have a coach or a grandma or some other cultural advisor in their life who are important people who can help us understand them. And then what are their strengths? And I also, to me, what are their hopes are also their strengths, right? Because they have hopes for themselves that can drive getting to those hopes and making them real. Okay, so from a judge's perspective, case manager is a critical person. Whoever is doing that function in your juvenile healing to wellness court, they're the ones who are be able to develop this relationship and understand that young person to inform the kinds of incentives and sanctions that will work with that young person. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So, what are the best practice models for motivating change in youth? There is a publication put out by the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. It's called Individualizing Responses to Motivate Behavior Change in Youth, a four-pronged approach. And it's at the end of this slide set. You'll see the resource for it. So I'm going to just describe to you how it works. There's actually a bundle of different approaches inside of it. Now, I anticipate I might get a couple of different reactions like, well, this is how the state drug court systems do it. Why are we following it? Or we don't have the capacity or the staff to make this work. And my response is that I think as tribal sovereigns and as part of our pursuit of or assertion of our sovereignty, it's really important to understand the underlying models that we either adopt or modify, because my analogy is always, how do you know whether you're building a car or an airplane? Do you need one to fly in the air and one to drive on the road? Then you want to understand the base purpose of the model. And then if you modify it from there, great. But let's understand the foundation so we can make it work the way we need it to work. And so the latest, most greatest model out there right now so far is this one called the four-pronged approach. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide and I can describe some of it. Okay, so the four-pronged approach assumes a certain amount of juvenile drug court infrastructure, and we model some of it here for a juvenile healing to wellness court. Some tribes follow a lot of this, others follow only parts of it, but the way it's thought to work is I'll describe it to you here. So the key components are best usually describing these blocks that are going around the circle here. So a very important first point is that you're moving youth out of your regular tribal juvenile court, and you're moving them into a separate court docket called a juvenile court docket. And this is often really hard to explain to tribal judges because they think they're used to holding regular quasi-adversarial court process where they put youth on probation with probation conditions under a court order. And one of those conditions is to order them to treatment. And they say, why isn't that a juvenile healing to wellness court? Because it doesn't have the separate court docket that is therapeutic, that is not governed by the rules of evidence, that is not governed by the court rules. Instead, its entire purpose is therapeutic. Indeed, the latest thought is that you really should use those status hearings in a juvenile healing to wellness court to apply incentives to basically you're doing behavior change interventions through incentives and sanctions in that process. Totally different than trying to apply the law to the facts to find somebody guilty, to hold them accountable for probation violations. Totally different process. Okay, so let's talk about the juvenile healing to wellness court process, the therapeutic court process. So it starts with case management. That young person, remember, meets with their case manager and they learn about each other and they develop a relationship, and the case manager learns about their hopes and dreams and goals for themselves and then shares that with the juvenile healing to wellness court team. And then some juvenile healing to wellness courts also do the random drug and alcohol testing as part of the phases that a young person moves through. And then I've mentioned the phases, which are include both like a case management plan and a treatment plan, and cultural things. And you'll see that in the big yellow box on the left. So this may be restorative practices, elders and mentors, tribal history classes, cultural education and skill building, workshops on historical trauma, Native support groups, culturally adapted evidence-based practices like counseling or counseling groups and workbooks. Those phased plans can be culturally modified, not culturally replaced, but modified and added to. So it's kind of a hybrid treatment and case management plan. So the youth usually are held to following those plans because there's a weekly meeting of team members who review their progress in their plan. And then that is followed by a juvenile healing to wellness court status hearing, where the team and the judge, they give out incentives in response to whether the youth are doing well in their plan. And then that's followed up with more case management meetings where they talk about whether the young person is meeting their goals. Now, if a young person moves through all the phases, they do well, they can graduate from the program with no record in the court system. And we hope that they go on and do great things, and maybe they come back as alumni and help others in the program. If they don't finish or they have other violations, they might be terminated from the program at some point. But there's definitely a move that wasn't there in the early years with drug courts to give them another chance to find a way to help them with what they need and let them try again. So this is the base model of what a therapeutic juvenile healing to wellness court docket looks like. And then we're going to talk about pretty much arrows 1, 2, and 3 here because they are tightly associated with how to make incentives and behavior change work. So let's start with arrow number 1, all the way at the top, where we just are at the beginning and they meet with their case manager. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, lots of words here. The gist of what I want you to get out of this is that case management starts at the beginning, but it's an ongoing process throughout the whole juvenile healing to wellness court. And case management is not probation. I mean, probation officers can do case management, but case management really should focus not on the detection of violations of the rules of the program, but on addressing the needs of the young person in a holistic manner. And it should include some behavioral health treatment and family interventions and culture. It should include the whole menu. And then typically in a juvenile drug court, case management includes a behavior contract that is part of the case plan. And those contracts and plans have the goals of the young person in them. Like, what do they want? Do they want to become an artist? Do they want to become a doctor? Do they want to work in a particular trade or build a business? They have their goals inside of it in a written document, and it's something that they're striving for as part of a juvenile healing to wellness court. There's more here on the details of the contract and the case plan, but the big important thing is that they're individualized. You don't have a standard contract with standard language or a standard case plan with standard language. You have something that is individualized to that young person. Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide. Let's talk about the weekly team meetings here real quick. This is arrow number 2. So once your youth are in your program and they're moving through the phases, your team should be meeting weekly to talk about how are they doing in their phases. So you're not only saying how are they doing, but you're also kind of discussing whether you should give them incentives and what kinds of incentives. And if you do formal sanctions, those as well. So it's kind of a little committee meeting on who gets a reward and how much. And you're looking at their progress across both their case plan and their treatment plans, including all the cultural elements that are in there as well. So what are the best practices in these meetings? And I'm just going to talk about 4 of them. So a best practice in these team meetings is to discuss small successes first. Like, what little things are they doing that they're progressing at or doing well? What are their strengths and what are the positive outcomes? Talk about these things first. Really important to pick up on those things. Chris did a really good job of talking about like her raising her own kid. And I think that thinking about your own kids and how they respond as they're growing up is a really good way to think about this. You know, my kid never responded, no kid probably responds well to punishment, but they sure do respond well to praise, pride in them, praise of them when they do something well. And in my kid's life, that's had the biggest bang over giving them a thing like a, I don't know, something they like a Christmas present. It seems they really, really crave the recognition and the pride of their parents and the judge in a juvenile healing to wellness court. So the next thing that the team should do in these meetings is you're going to be highlighting their positive behavior by assigning them a tangible incentive. And I think in our juvenile healing to wellness courts, we often think of these as things like, can you give them a movie card? Or back in the day, it was a CD player. But actually, the best practice approach is to create a token economy or use a whole points-based process, token process, raffle process, so that they're involved in the ability to sort of win an item as opposed to just directly getting items immediately, and starting with smaller things first. Another important admonition is for the teams is to use careful language. The example they always use is with drug testing, instead of calling tests dirty, you have a dirty drug test, call them positive or negative. Try to watch your language in your teamwork and the way you talk to your participants so that it's not like stigmatizing or blaming or dirtying, if you need to think of it that way. And then the final item I'd point out is the last one, that it's really important for your team and your judges to interact with youth and families outside of court. You know, whether it's a potluck or a family night or a picnic, you're still really always doing that relationship building part of it and getting to know them and building the trust and the rapport. So teamwork is not just, you know, 9 to 5 in the meeting or in the court hearing. It's happening outside of work as well. All right, let's jump to the next slide. All right, I wanted to talk about the actual status hearings in a juvenile healing to wellness court and how they relate to incentives. So I'm looking at arrow number 3 here. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so of course the judge is still in charge of the court process. However, there is a strength-based process and courtroom protocol for juvenile healing to wellness courts and juvenile drug courts. And one of them is the way that cases are reviewed. There are some approaches or techniques or technologies, however you want to think about it. The 4-pronged approach talks about the 100% club, the rocket docket, and the star of the week protocol. I'll talk about some of these a little bit today, but for time, I'm going to refer you to the 4-pronged approach document, and you can learn more about these approaches. They're fun, actually, and I think your participants will find them to be fun and rewarding, and it will affect their behavior in the right direction. Even in the courtroom, even with judges, the experts are recommending strength-based conversations. What does this mean to a judge? That means the judge engages youth in positive strength-based conversations and focuses on achievable goals that are identified during case planning. He talks about the strengths, their interests, their hopes, their visions, and how they're getting closer to those things or maybe further away from those things, given the conduct in the last week. but it's always goal or interest focused with the young person. And always talking about the little things, the little positive things they've achieved first. And actually, that's the first bullet down here. Now, you may notice this is exactly the same list that you saw for the team meeting. It is, because the same thing should be happening in both places. The ones I want to highlight for the judge, though, are discuss the small successes first. Do that first before you ever talk about a sanction. Highlight positive behavior with doling out incentives. And handle sensitive topics. If anything is going to be embarrassing to a young person, you want to do that in a separate hearing that doesn't involve all the others there. And I'll take let me do the last one and then I'll take a question. If you are going to give detention as a sanction in this process, you want to hold a separate closed hearing. You don't want to shame or stigmatize a young person with that big of a sanction in front of other people. And so sometimes you will split out a separate hearing that doesn't involve all the other participants. Okay, I see a lot of chat activity going on. Ashley, did we have a question?
Yes, there was a question. And Patricia says, does the Tribal Wellness Court connect youth to positive pro-social activities to increase community connections?
Definitely. So as part of your design of your phased plans of things they'll be involved in, you will add in pro-social activities, which can also be all those cultural activities that we were looking at as well. So yes, that should be a fundamental component of your the things you require of youth to be involved in as part of their phases. And Chris, you look like you might have a thought.
Yeah, Judge, I also just wanted to add that going back to the slide where we talked about responding to participant behavior starts right at assessment. These are those questions, and Judge even just highlighted it again, that we should be asking. What are those things that they like to do? What are important to them? What are those things? Because, you know, as a community, we can have these activities going on, but you know, maybe not everybody likes to play basketball, so they might not want to do the basketball tournament, but they do maybe want to learn the language. So learning the language, or the other thing too is maybe they like to read. They like to read to younger kids or something. So it starts at that assessment and finding out what they like to do. This is how we can help to personalize, especially those pro-social activities.
That's an excellent point. All right, let's take a look at some of the little tools they have in the four-pronged approach. Go to the next slide. Don't freak out on me. It's a table, but it's actually not that complicated. I actually had to look at it a little while for myself, but this is what the four-pronged approach calls an aggregated compliance spreadsheet, which sounds like doing your taxes. But basically what you're doing is you're tracking for each youth, you're tracking what they did this week. So you'll see it runs for a week, Sunday, Monday, all the way to Saturday. And you see that one of the boxes or columns says actual on it, and then it says actual 3441 going down. So for example, that young person was expected to go to treatment 3 times, whatever that treatment is. They were expected to go to school. Oh, I'm sorry, needed. Let's look at needed, next column. Needed is they were expected to go to treatment 3 times, to go to school 5 times, right? Monday through Friday. They were expected to call in to probably the coordinator to see if they were supposed to do a random drug test and what day they were supposed to come in. They were supposed to call every single day of the week, 7 times. And then they were expected to show up for drug testing or alcohol testing 3 times in the week. Now, if you look at the actual column, that tells you how many times they actually showed up or did the thing. So this person, who we'll call Josh, he went to his treatment all 3 times. He went to school 4 of the 5 days of the week. He called in 4 of the 7 times, and he showed up once for a drug test. So if you see the overall, I give you a percentage of, in this 1 week, what percentage of the things that Josh achieved. And it gives you the percentage for week 1 here. The little yellow blocks are the days that Josh was randomly supposed to go get a drug or alcohol test. Let's go to the second slide. So you'll see this is only tracking about 3 weeks in a juvenile healing to wellness court. But whatever week you're doing your meeting on with the team members, you're going to look at the overall score, which is at the bottom here. So they're just tallying up all the numbers here for an overall percentage over the 3 weeks. And if you're having weekly meetings, you're going to look at, how are they doing? Are they doing what they said they were going to do as part of their case management and treatment plan, overall? Let's go to the next slide. So it depends on who you hire to do this, but it's usually the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court coordinator. They do a report every week to the team, and they're tallying all that information in the spreadsheets, and they know what the overall percentages are every week, and they'll change, right? Because you're adding more weeks every week. So on the left-hand side, they're really giving you a snapshot to the whole team. This is how they're doing with treatment, going to treatment. This is how they're doing going to school. This is how they're doing with call to test, how they're doing with their actual drug tests. Are they positive or negative? I'm sorry, showing up to get tested, and then what the test results are. And then they're showing on the left-hand side of this table what the goals are. So these are the things that are in their case management plan and their contract. So one of their goals is always to reduce substance use. Whatever all their other goals are, there's a bunch of them. They always, if they're in a juvenile healing to wellness court, one of them is reducing substance use. They may also be trying to be going to school and be more engaged in school. Then there's probably some pro-social activity goals. And there's another category about their values, beliefs, and attitudes in this example anyway. This is things like, are they increasing their capacity for empathy if there was a victim involved for some reason and whatever got them into this juvenile healing to wellness court. So the team members decide on how they're progressing on their goals. Now the case manager could also do this, and they're basically looking at this scale on the bottom. It's a Likert scale. 0 means there's no progress this week from that young person in this area. 1 is less than expected progress. 2 is expected progress. 3 is they completed the objective, and they fill that out before the weekly meeting. And then the whole team comes together and looks at this report. And then they think about, well, has this person, how are they doing? What do they need next week? When we go to the hearing, are they eligible for an incentive? Is a sanction necessary? But this snapshot report, which is compiled by your coordinator and case manager, helps the team make decisions before the court hearing every week. So this is what the standard model does. Ashley, I should just check in for a minute. Are there any more questions or chat?
I don't see any questions or Q&A coming up, so it looks like everyone's doing okay so far. And just remember, you could use the chat box and the Q&A if you need to reach out to any of the presenters.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so we've been talking about how do you track what's happening with each young person so you know exactly what's happening. But now, assuming we have that in place, how do you create an award system? They, in the lingo, call this a microeconomy. And they say that in the old school way of doing things, juvenile drug courts would really rely heavily on monitoring program compliance. So they were looking at whether youth followed the rules. And if they didn't follow the rules, they'd get a sanction. And that really was the primary drive behind this whole sanctions and incentives thing, and that's why they put the word sanction before incentives. And that was really a backward way. Now we know that it doesn't work. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, doesn't matter because it actually doesn't work with the adolescent brain. Chris, did you want to say a little bit about why it doesn't work, being punitive and sanction oriented?
Again, I think because of that heightened emotional sense that our adolescents are at that period of time. Also, so if it, like I exaggerated and I told you about my child, looking at them the wrong way, elicited this detriment, things like that. But I think part of it is just because it's um, that heightened emotional sense or emotional state that they're in. Just looking at them wrong, speaking to them in maybe a tone that just they could take the wrong way. So I think that's part of it. But then also too, you think of adolescents. Um, we have so many expectations for them. Oh, we want them to do this or we want them to do that. And sometimes maybe they don't have the skills to do those things. So maybe our first response will always like, give it to me. Here, let me do it myself. Or, you never do, we use those terms as parents and as adults with our adolescents. And so sometimes when you're coming into this program and then they see the judge as an authority figure or as maybe a parent on the bench, or if they're sitting among them, and then it's like, oh, it's just this same old. I get this at home, and this person is just going to be like, my family or whoever in my house gets after me or scolds me. So this is why it's not really this approach, that punitive approach, does not work with our adolescents. It just doesn't. Does that make sense?
It does. Whether we agree with it or not, they just simply will not cooperate with a punitive approach. And it actually might cause them to relapse or spiral backward. So instead, the approach shifts to one of goals, really tying their behavior and our response to their behavior on whether or not they're achieving the goals that they set out for themselves. And that we, worked with them on. And the whole microeconomy approach that we're about to describe here is really goal focused. How can we use incentives to help them further their goals that they set for themselves? Ashley, I see there might be chat. Did you have a question?
Yes. Elizabeth says, how are caretakers included in this treatment plan?
So they totally can be, as part of the case management plan. They could have come in and been involved in all the planning and the relationship building. I will point out, and I know we're on a national webinar, so we may be talking to folks that are beyond the CTAS Purpose Area 8 grantees under OJJDP. It turns out that a lot of tribes are using a wraparound case management approach, which is a different approach than the drug court case management approach. And if they are, they're really pulling in those natural supports and extended family members as part of the planning process and the goal setting process in what we would think of as case management in drug court. So that definitely happens with a whole bunch of juvenile healing to wellness courts. But then there's others that don't use wraparound, and I guess the plea maybe, or maybe we should say a best practice would be to try to identify the people that that young person thinks of as family, as positive supports for them, and involve them in the case planning from the beginning. And they can help reinforce some of this. And maybe part of the question is, you know, do you need incentives if you have those people? You might not need as many incentives if you have those people. But unfortunately, not every young person has those people. And so I think a combination of the incentives and the natural supports is a good thing. Okay. So what the, oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Pat. I do want to address Sandra's point. She says building a rapport of trust initially has helped.
Definitely. Indeed, you can't do anything without it. It does suggest that you should very carefully hire the person who is your case manager or your wraparound facilitator, because they have to be the kind of people who can build those relationships and that trust, and or go get training in the techniques for doing that. Often motivational interviewing is suggested, but there's other ways of doing it as well. Also, some people are just more inclined that way. I know that would be a hard job for me because my temperament and my sort of the bent of my personality is not as conducive to that as some other people just have just the right personality for that. Trust is critical to making any of this work. All right, so what the heck is a microeconomy? It's a system. First off, it might be a points system where you're giving people points. You might be giving them tickets or little tokens. I was describing to our folks here at TYRC that when I was a kid, these researchers came to Hopi in my school, and they gave us all these little aprons with, and they handed out these little red plastic discs or tokens. And every time we did something good, they gave us a token, and we'd have, by the end of the day, like pockets full of little plastic tokens. And then every Friday we got to go shopping in a little store with our plastic tokens. That's a microeconomy, and that's an incentive system. They're actually trying to get you to keep doing good behavior things. Because as a little kid, you learn, oh, I get to go to the store, right? So there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. As you can see, some people use monopoly money, some people use vouchers or coins or tokens. So it'd be worth it to kind of look at what others are doing and see how it's working. And the whole point is that you're trying to figure out what kinds of behaviors you want to incentivize. So do you want them to show up to school 5 days a week? That's something you put on the list. Do you want them to attend their treatment or their pro-social activities? Put those things on the list. Do you want them to treat each other with respect, help their elders? Put those behaviors on the list. And these are all things that can get a reward. And then they actually recommend that you rank them. So there's like small value rewards, medium, and high. And then you identify the behaviors that go with them, and you make a reward menu. And you might wonder, why the heck do we have to get so detailed? And the answer is you want to have a consistent response from all team members, because I know some team members like me are going to want to give them a big giant cake every time they do something good. But another team member who understands the youth a little better than maybe Judge Pat, they're going to be like, no, you need to start small, you know, or this is a case where you use praise instead of a present. You want consistency from all team members so that the effects of what they do don't undermine the lesson of what behavior you want to promote. And then also when you do your policies and procedures manual, you want to put all of this into it so that everyone is using the same system. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is separate from the microeconomy. And by the way, you don't have to do all these things. It's just kind of like a bundle of things you could do. So the Rocket Docket is another system. And in this one, you let the youth who are doing really well under the Rocket Docket rules, you let them go first in the hearings, where everyone is in the hearing at the same time, all the participants, and they can leave early. So kids or youth who are on the Rocket Docket, they get special privileges. There's no limit on how many young people can be on the Rocket Docket. And then whether they qualify is based on what happened just this week or this last week since the last court hearing. Some things can knock them off the eligibility list. So if they got a new charge, if they did something that caused a new charge in the court system, for example, or maybe they drank or used drugs in between, that will knock them off the list of being eligible for Rocket Docket. Once their names are on the list, however, they are recognized in an official way, both by the judge in the court hearing, and also there's usually a list of like, here are all the Rocket Docket kids, and there's some visual way to recognize every week who's on the Rocket Docket. So how do you qualify if you're a young person? And of course, this is the model, and your team might change it and culturally adapt it. But the things in the model are like, they would have to have no positive drug test results. They'd have to have 100% attendance in school and treatment that week. They have no new citations either at school or court, for example. So you get the idea. So every week you're allowing the youth who are doing really well to get some extra special recognition and privileges. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And maybe I'll just do this one as we're running down our time. This one is a program-wide drawing. And I think this is ongoing. It's not tied to the court hearings at all. You create the possibility that every week young people can earn points to get the right to be in a drawing. And you have a whole bunch of small things they can do to get points, like maybe they helped someone, maybe they were on time, or they were respectful, or they were extra loving. Maybe they just received a good report from a service provider. So you give them points or a ticket or some kind of exchangeable thing so that they can buy an incentive if they've done these things every week. And let's go to the next slide just so I can show you what the card looks like. So they go into a drawing for a small prize, a medium prize, or a large prize. And let's go forward one more. So on the right-hand side here, you see the nomination card. A team member can nominate them and say why. And then you can see the different prize levels, small, medium, large. The small things are like, you can leave court early. You get credit for, they're calling it service learning, but I think it's like community service. So you get off of community service for an hour, or you get a $5 gift card, or you get more points if you're building up points to something big. And you can see those things increase when the prizes get bigger. So what's the point here? Give some thought to your scheme. Make sure all your team members help build it and understand it and are consistent with it, and put it in your policies and procedures manual. And I see Chris popping on. So Chris, do you have a thought?
I do. I was going to say, I really like this approach because it involves all of the team members. And it also involves taking a look at all the different facets of juvenile healing to wellness courts that our participants are in. Treatment, community service, case management, if they are participating in maybe or with a school, you can have a school liaison and then also any kind of community thing. It really involves all of those other team members in acknowledging, recognizing, and being mindful to pay attention to positive behavior. And like I said, catch them being good. I love this. And in fact, I actually have an adult healing to wellness court in Wisconsin that is doing this very similar thing. So thanks, Judge.
Thank you. Yes, it's catch them being good. Don't look for program violations. That's the big shift in thinking. Put incentives first, have more incentives than sanctions. Ashley, can you scroll us to the resources page? I want to show them where this is all coming from. Okay, so you see this publication on the right called Motivate Behavior Change, the four-pronged approach. This is where it's coming from. Please follow this link if you want to see the details of what we've talked about today. My caveat as a tribal judge is that, of course, you can culturally adapt this. You can choose one of the things, not or all of the things. It is like a technology, right? Or a tool in a toolbox. We're giving you an extra tool that you didn't have before that's focusing on very positive things and is less punitive. And of course, our big admonition is be consistent across your team members, put it in your policies and procedures, test drive your approach and tweak it if you need to. And I see we're running down on time, so I think I'm going to hand it back over to Ashley. And thank you all for listening today.
Thank you, Judge Pat and Miss Chris. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We have 2 parts left, and we have an evaluation, and then we'll close in a good way. And closing in a good way just means we want you to feel really great about serving your youth and moving forward. So let's launch this evaluation. This helps us with our grant and also just tells us what we could do better at. So please let us know. And I want to go ahead and launch the evaluation here. It's only 4 questions. It takes about a minute. And please answer. All right, so I'm going to launch the end of session evaluation. There's only 4 questions. And please let us know how we did. And it's great to see you, Paul. Thank you for joining. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. My email is there, ashleya@tlpi.org. And I just have this wonderful point to say that I just appreciate Judge Pat and Miss Chris in guiding me and serving you. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up and close in a good way. And Misty, I'm going to go ahead and end poll. Thank you, everyone. And Misty, thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind closing us in a good way.
Sure, but that's fine. Thank you, everyone, for attending and so forth. So I'll just go ahead and say a short prayer. Misty said of all and I'm speaking for everyone here who has attended this webinar discussing childhood and how the Indigenous youth live about their ways. Creator, and I ask that you just take care of us and continue being with us as we continue to serve our Indigenous communities Just let us remember how it was for our youth, for our days in our childhood, to understand the youth that are coming about today. Creator, I ask that you just take care of us, ensure that our daily living is traditional, sacred, and that we're being mindful about what we're doing, and just ensuring that our compassion and commitment is there to serve the Indigenous youth. Yeah, Creator.
Thank you, Misty, for closing us in a good way. Thank you, everyone, for being here, serving our youth, serving this next generation, and taking good care of them. Remember to take good care of yourself. If you need anything, go email us or visit us at tribalyouth.org. Bye, everyone. Take care.